Price of Betrayal: The Legacy of Arthur Vance. Subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any breathtaking stories. Chapter 1. The Parting Storm. What does it take for a man to miss the birth of his first and only child? For tech magnate Julian Vance, the answer was a 45-meter super yacht, 3 cases of Dom Perignon, and his mistress Sierra Monroe's 25th birthday. While his wife, Sophia, writhed in pain in a sterile hospital room, Julian popped champagne in Marbella Bay, toasting a woman who was not his own. This isn't just a story of infidelity. It's the chronicle of a calculated betrayal, years in the making. What no one knew was that the party, the yacht, and the woman at the center of it all were part of a secret that would burn his entire world to the ground. The first contraction hit Sophia Vance like a punch, a breathtaking, suffocating clench that stole her breath. She clutched the cold marble of the kitchen island in her penthouse, her knuckles white. Outside, a violent July storm lashed the floor-to-ceiling windows, the sky a bruised purple that mirrored the sudden tempest in her own body. Another wave of pain rose, sharp and undeniable. It was happening. 3 weeks early. But it was happening. Her hand trembled as she picked up her phone, her thumb hovering over her husband Julian's contact photo. It was a picture from their wedding 2 years ago, him smiling, his eyes bright with an ambition she had once mistaken for adoration. Now she only saw the ambition. She pressed the call button. It rang once, twice, then a third time before jumping to the smooth, exasperatingly calm voice of his voicemail. "You've reached Julian Vance. I'm currently unavailable. Please leave a message." "Julian, it's me," she gasped, trying to keep the panic out of her voice. Another contraction was building, a deep, pulling tide. "It's time. The baby's coming. My water just broke. Please, call me. I'm going to call Dr. Ruiz, and then I'm heading to the hospital. Please, just get on a plane." She hung up and sent a text, her fingers fumbling. "It's happening. The baby's coming now." Then another, more desperate. "Julian, please answer me." There was no response. She knew where he was. He was in Marbella for a last-minute critical investor meeting. A deal, he said, that would catapult his tech firm, Innovate, into the stratosphere. He had sounded so convincing, his hand on her swollen belly, promising he would be back by morning, that he wouldn't miss a thing. "It's for us, Sophie. For our family," he had murmured, his kiss feeling more like a transaction than an act of love. But Sophia wasn't naive. She was a Vance, a family whose old money roots were so deep in the city that they were practically part of the bedrock. She knew the difference between a business trip and a retreat, and she knew about Sierra Monroe. She had known for 6 months, ever since a private investigator she'd hired on a hunch she could no longer ignore had handed her a discreet manila envelope filled with photographs. Pictures of Julian and a dazzling raven-haired woman laughing on a balcony in Ibiza, holding hands at a bistro in Grazia, kissing in the back seat of his own luxury car. Her sister, Clara, had urged her to leave him that very instant. "He's a parasite, Sophie," Clara had said, her loyalty fierce. "He married into the Vance name to get his foot in the door, and now he's disrespecting you with this Instagram model." But Sophia had hesitated. Because of the baby. She had clung to a sliver of hope that the reality of fatherhood, the birth of his own child, would be the necessary cataclysmic event to shake the selfishness out of him. She had decided to wait, to give him one last chance to prove he could be the man he promised to be. Now, as she leaned against the island, the pain radiating down her back, that hope felt like the most foolish naivety. She called her sister. "Clara!" "Sophie, what's wrong? You sound—" "It's time," Sophia gasped, another contraction taking hold. Can you Can you meet me at the hospital?" "I'm on my way," Clara said, her voice instantly shifting from worried sister to military commander. "Forget it. We'll do this ourselves." Have you ever been in a situation where the person you trusted most has completely let you down? How did you react? 800 kilometers to the south, the Marbella air was thick, warm, and electric, but the storm on the horizon didn't concern Julian Vance. He was standing on the pristine teak deck of the Serenity, a 45-meter super yacht he had chartered for the weekend. The boat was a temple of hedonism, with waiters serving endless flutes of Dom Perignon and a DJ spinning a deep house track that vibrated up through the soles of his designer loafers. His phone, propped on a nearby table, buzzed silently on the linen napkin where he had placed it, the screen lighting up with a photo of his wife. He glanced at it. A flicker of annoyance crossed his handsome features before he returned his attention to the woman of the hour. Sierra Monroe was a vision. She was wearing a dazzling silver backless dress that clung to her like a second skin. Her 25th birthday was the real critical business of the weekend. She pouted, wrapping her arms around his neck. "Are you distracted?" she whispered, her lips brushing his ear. "Is everything okay with your little business?" Julian forced a charming smile, the one that had won over boardrooms and, for a time, Sophia. "The deal is right here," he said, pulling a black velvet box from his pocket. He opened it to reveal the Constellation necklace, a spray of brilliant cut diamonds by Lorraine Schwartz, rumored to be worth more than the penthouse Sophia was suffering in at that very moment. Sierra gasped, her eyes wide. The small crowd of her carefully curated guests, influencers, minor celebrities, and other wealthy sycophants, exclaimed in unison, "Julian, I don't know what to say," she stammered, though she seemed to know exactly what to say. "Say you'll wear it," he said, his voice as smooth as silk. As he fastened the cold diamonds around her warm skin, he felt a surge of power. This was real. The money, the boat, this beautiful woman, Sophia and her stuffy, judgmental family, the impending burden of fatherhood, all of that felt like a distant, monochromatic dream. Here, in the vibrant, intoxicating world he had built for himself, everything was in color. His friend, a venture capitalist named Marcus Thorne, clapped him on the shoulder, a knowing smirk on his face. "To Sierra," Marcus toasted, raising his glass. "And to Julian, for knowing how to close a deal." Everyone cheered. Julian's phone buzzed again, and again. He ignored it. He was busy. He was the king of his own universe, and in his universe, there were no consequences. The storm on the horizon was just part of the scenery. It couldn't touch him. Back in the city, Sophia's sister Clara was holding her hand while a doctor took her vitals. The hospital room was cold and impersonal. The rhythmic beep of the fetal monitor was the only soundtrack. "Still nothing from him?" Clara asked, her voice tight with a rage she was trying to repress for her sister's sake. Sophia shook her head, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. She turned off her phone. The words she whispered tasted like ash. The hope she had clung to was gone, replaced by a cold, hard certainty. The man she had married wasn't just absent. He was gone. And she was, totally and terrifyingly alone, on the precipice of the most important moment of her life. The doctor gave her a look of sympathy. "Your blood pressure is a bit high, Sophia. I need you to try to relax. We're going to take good care of you." Relax was a ridiculous suggestion. How could she relax when her entire life was fracturing, breaking as surely and as painfully as her own body in that very instant? The two storms, the one outside the window and the one inside her heart, had finally merged into one, and she was in the eye of the storm. The hours that followed were a blur of antiseptic smells, rhythmic beeps, and a pain so profound, Sophia felt it was rewriting her at a cellular level. Each contraction was a wave that threatened to drown her, pulling her into a world of white-hot agony before receding, leaving her gasping on the shore for a few precious minutes of peace. Clara was a constant presence, a steady anchor in the storm. She held a cup of crushed ice to Sophia's lips, wiped her forehead with a cool cloth, and murmured words of encouragement that were both gentle and fierce. With each passing hour, Clara's gaze would drift to Sophia's silent phone on the bedside table. Her expression would harden each time, her jaw tightening. Around 3 a.m., she picked it up. "I'm going to call him again," she stated, her voice low and dangerous. "No," Sophia managed to say, her voice raw. "It's no use, Clara. He made his choice." "He doesn't have the right to make that choice," Clara replied, her fingers already dialing. As she expected, it went straight to voicemail. She left a message, her voice trembling with suppressed fury. "Julian, it's Clara. Your wife is in labor. She's been for 7 hours. She's in pain. And she's scared. And you are a coward. There's no deal in the world more important than this. If there's a shred of decency left in your soul, get on a plane right now. You're about to become a father. For God's sake, act like one." She slammed the phone down, her own eyes filled with tears of rage. "I hate him. I really, truly hate him for this." Sophia had no energy to respond. She was immersed in the primal, all-consuming work of childbirth. The world shrank to the 4 walls of the delivery room, the doctor's encouraging voice, and the desperate, elemental need to push. It was the hardest thing she had ever done in her life. It was a marathon of pain and endurance that pushed her to the very edge of her strength. And then, at 5:17 a.m., just as the first light of dawn was beginning to break in the Barcelona sky, the storm broke. With a final guttural cry that was part agony and part triumph, her son was born. The sound of his first cry, a robust, indignant wail, cut through the exhaustion. The doctor gently placed the baby on her chest, and in that instant, everything else faded away. The pain, the betrayal, the empty space in the room where Julian should have been, it all disappeared. All that existed was the small, warm, squirming weight of her son. He was perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes, a downy of dark hair, and eyes that squinted at the bright new world. Tears streamed down Sophia's face, but they weren't tears of sorrow. They were tears of pure, unadulterated love, a love so fierce and absolute she felt it could power a city. "Hello, my sweet boy," she whispered, her voice husky with emotion. "I got you. I'm here." Clara was weeping beside her, her hand resting on Sophia's shoulder. "He's beautiful, Sophie. Absolutely perfect." A nurse gently interrupted the sacred moment. "Do you have a name picked out?" Sophia looked at her son, at his small, perfect face, and a sense of clarity washed over her. She had considered names with Julian, but they now felt tainted. They belonged to a life that was no longer hers. She chose a name that meant strength, integrity, and honor. A name that represented everything Julian wasn't. "His name is Arthur," she said, her voice clear and strong. "Arthur James Vance." She made a deliberate decision to use her own family's surname. Castro felt like a brand, a hollow corporate entity. Vance. Vance was her heritage. It was theirs. While Arthur James Vance took his first breaths in Barcelona, the party on the Serenity in Marbella was reaching its peak. Champagne was still flowing, and Sierra Monroe, bedecked in diamonds and Julian's attention, was the center of it all. "A photo!" she exclaimed, her voice a little slurred with champagne. "We need a perfect photo to remember this night forever." She snuggled up to Julian, her bare back pressed against his chest. "Marcus, darling," she cooed, seeing Julian's friend nearby. "Be a doll and get a photo of us. Make sure the necklace is in it." Marcus Thorne, ever the accommodating friend, took Sierra's phone. He was a meticulous man, and he framed the shot with an artist's eye. He captured the glittering Marbella skyline in the background, the soft glow of the yacht's deck lights, the sparkle of the constellation necklace against Sierra's tanned skin, and Julian, smiling like a king, his arm wrapped possessively around her waist. It was a portrait of decadent bliss. "Perfect," Marcus said, handing back the phone. Sierra's fingers flew across the screen, her acrylic nails tapping rhythmically. In seconds, the image was uploaded to her public Instagram profile, which boasted over 2 million followers. She didn't tag Julian's official account. That was their one rule. But the caption she wrote was a dagger wrapped in silk. "Best birthday a girl could ask for. Feeling like the only woman in the world tonight. Thanks to my King J for making my dreams come true. You spoil me. Yacht life chart Marbella nights. Birthday. 25 spoiled, blessed." The likes and comments began to pour in instantly. Hearts, fire emojis, and messages of goals and home that necklace flooded the post. It was a digital monument to their affair, time-stamped and shared with the world. The party finally began to wind down as the sun painted the eastern sky in shades of pink and orange. Julian, feeling the first unpleasant buzz of a champagne hangover, escorted Sierra to the master cabin. He finally retrieved his phone from the table where he had abandoned it hours before. He turned it on, and it immediately exploded with a relentless barrage of notifications. 27 missed calls. Sophia. Missed calls. Clara Vance. 42 new messages. A cold knot of dread began to form in his stomach, cutting through the alcoholic haze. He opened Sophia's messages first. "It's happening. The baby's coming now." 10:15 p.m. "At the hospital. It's really happening." 10:45 p.m. "Please, Julian. I need you." 11:30 p.m. Then came Clara's messages, each one colder and angrier than the last. "She's in labor, you coward. Pick up the phone." 11 o'clock p.m. "Your son is about to be born, and you're not here. I will never forgive you for this." Arthur James Vance was born at 5:17 a.m. He's 7 pounds, 2 ounces. He's beautiful, and he deserved to have his father here. 5:25 a.m. Don't bother coming. Arthur. The name hit Julian like a punch to the gut. It was Sophia's grandfather's name, a man who despised him. He sank onto a plush white sofa, the world spinning on its axis. He had missed it. He had truly missed it. The alibis he had been building in his head, the deal ran long, the storm, bad reception, they all felt pathetic and flimsy. Right then, an Instagram notification popped up on his screen. Your friend Marcus Thorne liked a post by Sierra Monroe. His thumb, moving as if of its own accord, tapped the notification. And there it was. The photo. Him. Sierra. The necklace. The yacht. Time-stamped. 2:34 a.m. It already had over 150,000 likes. He scrolled through the comments. A wave of nausea washed over him. Friends of his business partners, even a cousin of Sophia's, had liked the post. It wasn't just a photo. It was proof. It was a verdict delivered and certified by social media for the entire world to see. The cold knot of dread in his stomach turned to ice. This wasn't something he could manipulate. This wasn't a problem he could throw money at. He hadn't just missed the birth of his son. He had been caught red-handed, celebrating his own betrayal, at the exact moment he should have been by his wife's side. The king of his own universe was suddenly a fool, and he knew with a sickening certainty that his kingdom was about to come crashing down. What do you think Julian should have done at that moment? Was there any way he could have saved himself from this situation? Chapter 2. The hospital confrontation. Julian Vance's return to the city was a frantic, undignified race, a descent into a personal hell. The seamless luxury that used to insulate him from the world had vanished. There was no gleaming private jet waiting on the tarmac, no solicitous pilot asking about his comfort. Instead, he was crammed into seat 2A of a commercial flight, a humiliating experience that felt like a deliberate punishment. The smell of recycled air and lukewarm coffee, the proximity of ordinary people with their crying babies and oversized carry-on luggage, it was all an assault on his senses. He was just another man in an expensive, now wrinkled suit, his face a ghastly shade of pale under the harsh cabin lights, a mask of a hangover, dread, and mounting panic. For the 2.5-hour flight, his mind, usually a sharp instrument of calculation and strategy, became a frantic workshop of lies. He didn't allow himself to imagine Sophia in pain or the face of the son he had yet to meet. To do so would be to admit a guilt he couldn't afford to feel. Instead, he focused on building the narrative. His life was the ultimate story he had curated, and a master storyteller doesn't admit plot holes. He writes his way out of them. The deal was falling apart, Sophie. A total ambush. I had to stay. I had to fight for it. For us. For our future. He rehearsed the lines in his head, refining the emotional tone. My phone died. The storm. A total dead zone. He even devised a role for Sierra. She's the daughter of a key investor. It was her party on his yacht, and I was cornered. I was playing the game, Sophie, for our son's legacy. He repeated the lies until they began to feel like a plausible version of reality, a necessary fiction to protect the larger truth of his ambition. By the time the plane began its abrupt descent, he had almost managed to cast himself as the hero of the story, a noble warrior who had endured a trial by fire for his family. He felt a surge of righteous indignation. How could Sophia not understand the sacrifices he had to make? His first stop in the terminal was a ridiculously expensive florist. He didn't look at the flowers. He looked at their size. He chose a bouquet of long-stemmed red roses so enormous, so ostentatious, it was practically a caricature of remorse. It wasn't an olive branch. It was a prop, a shield. Armed with his props and his script, he took a taxi to the hospital, the performance of a lifetime about to begin. He was ready to play the part of the regretful, loving husband and the devoted new father. He found Sophia's private room on the quiet, hushed maternity ward, and he paused in front of the door, taking a deep breath to brace himself. He straightened his suit, composed his features into a mask of profound fatigue and overwhelming relief, and opened the door. But his performance was preempted. His path was blocked by Clara Vance, who was standing just inside the room as if she had been waiting for him. Her face was a study in cold fury. Her eyes, so much like her sister's, narrowed into slits of unconcealed contempt. She looked him up and down, her gaze lingering on the grotesque bouquet with an expression of pure disgust. "You are not welcome here," she said, her voice barely a whisper, but carrying the chilling force of a judge's sentence. Clara, please. Julian began his rehearsed lines, already feeling flimsy under her gaze. I need to see my wife. I need to see my son. You have a son named Arthur James Vance, Clara corrected him, her voice dripping acid. And you forfeited your right to see him somewhere between the champagne and the diamond necklace. You were busy. Before Julian could form a reply, a deeper, quieter voice cut through the tension from within the room. Let him in, Clara. Julian's blood ran cold. He knew that voice. It was the voice of old money, of quiet, unshakable power. Robert Vance, Sophia's father, stepped out of the shadows of the room and stood in the doorway. He was a tall, impeccably dressed man in his late 60s, with an upright posture that radiated generational authority. He didn't look angry. He looked at Julian with a deep, chilling disappointment that was infinitely worse. His eyes, a piercing blue, seemed to dissect Julian's very soul, stripping away the lies and the artifice to see the cheap, grasping creature underneath. Clara stepped aside grudgingly, her hatred a palpable force in the air. Julian walked into the room, his carefully constructed bravado evaporating under the silent scrutiny of Robert Vance. The room was hushed, save for the soft, rhythmic beep of a monitor. Sophia was sitting up in bed. She looked pale, exhausted, but her eyes held a new, steely determination he had never seen before. This wasn't the soft, forgiving woman he had left behind. This was a stranger. In a bassinet beside the bed, a tiny, perfect baby was sleeping peacefully, oblivious to the toxic drama unfolding around him. Arthur! Sophia! Julian said, his voice cracking for real this time. He stumbled toward her, holding out the roses like a pathetic offering. My God, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. The deal. It was a nightmare. They tried to bleed me dry, and the connection, my phone wouldn't work. I was trying to get back to you, I swear. Sophia just stared at him, her expression completely blank. She didn't even look at the flowers. Julian faltered, placing them awkwardly on a side table where they looked vulgar and out of place. He shifted his attention to the bassinet, a desperate pivot. He's perfect, he murmured, his voice husky with manufactured emotion. He reached out a tentative hand, touching the edge of the baby's soft blanket. Look at him, our son, Sophie. I was doing it for him, for this, to build a legacy that would protect him forever. He was back on his script now, the words flowing more easily. He was building his narrative of paternal ambition, of a father making agonizing decisions for his family's future. He spoke for nearly 5 minutes, a rambling, desperate monologue, painting a detailed picture of his fictional corporate battle, of backstabbing investors, of his frantic, helpless despair to get back to her side. Sophia listened to the entire performance in an absolute, chilling silence. Her father stood by the window, his arms crossed, a silent, powerful statue. Clara was by the door like a sentinel, her arms also crossed, a mirror of her father. When Julian finally ran out of words, his pathetic story hanging in the air, the silence in the room was deafening. Then Sophia spoke. Her voice was quiet, devoid of hysteria, but it was as sharp and cold as a shard of ice. Are you finished? Julian nodded, completely unnerved by her calm. This wasn't the reaction he had prepared for. Sophie, I love you. I'm so sorry I missed it. It's killing me. Is it really? She asked, a faint, joyless smile touching her lips. She reached for her phone on the bedside table. Her movements were slow, deliberate, each one a small, elegant act of war. She tapped the screen a few times, her composure shredding his nerves. Then she turned the phone and showed him. On the screen was the Instagram post, the photo of him and Sierra on the yacht. Him smiling like a fool, his arm wrapped possessively around her, the diamond necklace glittering against her skin like a beacon of his betrayal. The caption was barely visible underneath. Best birthday a girl could ask for, feeling like the only woman in the world tonight. Thanks to my king, Was this part of the negotiation? Sophia asked Julian, her voice still hauntingly level. Or was she the deal? The 25-year-old deal you had to play the game for? Tell me, does this look like a man who is being killed by his grief? Julian's face went white. The blood drained from his head, and for a second, he thought he might pass out. His carefully constructed narrative crumbled to dust, exposing the ugly truth underneath. That's not what it looks like, he stammered, the words feeling like sand in his mouth. She's a key investor's daughter. It was her birthday. I was cornered. She's manipulative, unstable. She posted that without my knowing, I swear. Stop, Sophia commanded. The single word cut through his stammering excuses and silenced him. Her eyes, once so full of adoration for him, were now filled with a cold, hard clarity. Just stop. The lying is the worst part. It's so insulting. Do you have any idea how pathetic you sound? You're standing there in front of my father, in front of my son, and you're spouting these pathetic, flimsy lies in my face. She pulled the phone away, her eyes locked on his, and then she delivered the blow that shattered his entire world. You think I just found out about this? About her? She asked, her voice dropping to an icy whisper that was more terrifying than any scream. Julian, I've known you've been seeing Sierra Monroe for 6 months and 12 days. I hired a private investigator last winter after the Gstaad business trip. I have a file in a safety deposit box in a bank you don't know about. It contains dates, times, receipts from the Hotel du Marc and the Chateau Marmont, copies of your credit card statements, detailing the jewelry you bought her. It even contains photographs, Julian. Dozens of them. Photographs far more incriminating than that small, vulgar Instagram post. Julian just stared at her, his mouth agape, his mind refusing to process the information. He felt as if the floor had dropped out from under him into a bottomless abyss. He hadn't been clever. He had been a fool, observed and documented like a specimen in a lab. She had known this trip to Marbella wasn't for business. I knew it was for her birthday. I didn't say anything because a small, stupid part of me wanted to believe I was wrong. I wanted to give you one last chance to prove you were the man I married, not this monster you've become. A chance to choose. I thought, surely the birth of his own child, surely that will be enough to bring him back. I gave you a clear choice, Julian. Your mistress's birthday party or your son's birthday, and you chose her. Every word was a nail in his coffin. He wasn't just an unfaithful man who got caught. He was a fool who had been watched, tested, and failed in the most spectacular, damning way imaginable. The power dynamic he thought he controlled had been an illusion. He had been the one being judged all along. He had nothing. No script, no alibi, no narrative. Just the ugly, naked truth of his own character, exposed under the harsh lights of the hospital room. I want you to leave, her final voice said, her gaze shifting from him to her son, as if Julian himself had already ceased to exist. Leave the flowers. I'm sure a nurse can throw them away. My lawyer will be in touch with yours by the end of the day. He already has the file. Julian stood motionless for a moment, his mind a maelstrom of shock and humiliation. He looked at Sophia's stony profile, Clara's triumphant glare, Robert Vance's impassive, judging face. He was a bug pinned to a board. He turned and walked out of the room like an automaton. As he passed Robert Vance, The older man spoke for the first time since he'd let him in, his voice low and laced with the chill of impending winter. "You didn't just betray my daughter, Julian. You betrayed my grandson before he took his first breath. You have made a grave error in judgment, and we, the Vances, have very long memories." The words weren't a threat. They were a statement of fact, a promise of a cold, methodical reckoning. Julian stumbled into the hallway, the door closing softly behind him, locking him out of that world forever. The huge bouquet of roses lay abandoned on the table inside, a garish monument to a lie that was never, for a single moment, believed. He was alone in the sterile hallway, the faint sound of a baby's cry coming from the room he could no longer enter. His world hadn't just cracked. It had been systematically dismantled by people he had fatally underestimated, and he had the sickening feeling that the demolition had only just begun. Chapter 3. The Downfall and Aftermath. Catalina Sokolov's televised confession wasn't just a bombshell. It was a nuclear event that vaporized the last remnants of Julian Vance's life. The consequences were immediate, total, and merciless. The divorce was a formality, an execution carried out with the swift, dispassionate precision of the Vance legal team, who confronted Julian with irrefutable evidence of both his infidelity and the original corporate fraud against Andrei Sokolov. Julian's lawyers advised him to capitulate completely. He signed the papers in a sterile conference room, the stroke of his pen transferring 50% of his shares of Innovate, the very foundation of his identity, to the Arthur James Vance Trust. His son was now the majority shareholder of his former empire, and his ex-father-in-law, Robert Vance, was the man who controlled the votes. It was a checkmate so perfect, so absolute, that Julian could almost admire the artistry of his own destruction. Professionally, he was radioactive. The board of directors at Innovate, desperate to distance themselves from the scandal, permanently ousted him. Shareholder lawsuits piled up, citing the original fraud, and the SEC launched a formal investigation. The story of his betrayal of Andrei Sokolov became a cautionary tale in business schools, a modern Icarus who hadn't just flown too close to the sun, but had stolen the wings to do it. His name was scrubbed from the Innovate website, his photos removed from the walls. It was as if he had never existed. His life shrank from a sprawling penthouse and global travel to a nondescript rented apartment in a city where no one knew his face. The sycophants who had once orbited him vanished. The calls stopped. He was left in a deafening silence, haunted by the ghosts of his own decisions. Months later, he sat alone in his sterile living room, scrolling through news on a tablet. He saw a social magazine headline: Sophia Vance launches groundbreaking tech ethics foundation. He clicked on it. There was a photo of Sophia, radiant and stronger than he had ever seen her. She was standing at a podium, her son Arthur in her arms. The article detailed her new philanthropic venture, headquartered in a beautifully restored building. Sophia, using her own resources and the considerable dividends from the Arthur Vance Trust, had established the Sokolov Scholarship for Ethical Innovation. Its mission was to provide funding and legal support to tech founders who had been swindled out of their own companies by predatory partners and investors. She had taken the poison of her own experience and transmuted it into an antidote for others. She hadn't just moved on, she had built a better world out of the wreckage of the one he had destroyed. Julian minimized the window. His reflection stared back at him from the dark screen. His lawyer had sent him a single photograph a week ago, the only one he had of his son. It was a studio portrait of Arthur, now 6 months old, smiling and bright-eyed. Julian looked at the photo on his phone and the image of the man on the tablet screen. He had lost. He had lost more than money or power. He had lost the opportunity for a legacy that wasn't written in stock prices, but in love and honor. He was utterly and completely alone. Sophia found that freedom was not the absence of pain, but the discovery of a purpose within it. After the divorce was finalized, she legally changed her son's name to Arthur James Vance, erasing the last link to the man who was his biological father, but would never be his dad. She left the suffocating confines of the city and moved to the family's sprawling estate, a place of rolling green hills and ancient oak trees that felt like a sanctuary. Here, surrounded by the genuine love of her family, she healed. She watched Arthur grow. She saw his first smile. She heard his first laugh. Each milestone was a silent victory, a reclaiming of the joy that had been stolen from her. The anger she had felt toward Julian slowly faded, replaced by a kind of distant pity for a man so empty he had to fill himself with the admiration of others. The idea for the Sokolov scholarship came to her one night while she was reading about Andrei's story. She saw a parallel between her own betrayal and his. Both had been victims of Julian's insatiable ego. She realized she had the power to do more than just heal herself. She could honor the man whose legacy Julian had tried to erase and prevent others from suffering the same fate. Working with her father, she poured her energy into building the foundation. It gave her a new identity, one that was entirely her own. She was no longer just Sophia Vance or the wronged wife of Julian Vance. She was a founder, a leader, a force for good. Her final scene in the drama was not a scene at all, but a quiet afternoon. She sat on a blanket under a great oak tree, the autumn leaves a burst of red and gold all around her. Arthur lay beside her, babbling happily at the sky. She felt a deep sense of peace settle over her, a quiet contentment that was more fulfilling than any party or diamond necklace. She had faced the worst of betrayals and had emerged not broken, but stronger, more compassionate, and more herself than ever. She was free. Chapter 4. The Cost of Revenge. Katalina Sokolov stood in front of her father's grave. The simple granite headstone read, Andrei Sokolov, a kind heart, a brilliant mind. For years, that had felt like an incomplete epitaph. Now, it felt truer than ever. She placed a copy of the Wall Street Journal on the grass. The headline read, The Fall of a Titan, How Julian Vance's Past Sins Led to the Collapse of His Empire. We did it, Dad, she whispered, her voice caught in the wind. Everyone knows what he did to you. Everyone knows your name. She had won. Her decade-long mission. The single focus of her entire adult life was complete. Julian was ruined. Her father's name was vindicated, and justice had been served. But as she stood there, an unexpected emotion washed over her. Emptiness. The fire of her rage had kept her warm for so long. It had fueled her. It had shaped her. It had given her purpose. Now that the fire had gone out, she felt cold. The persona of Sierra Monroe, the beautiful, shallow influencer, was a costume she could finally shed. But who was the woman underneath? Katalina Sokolov had been 17 when she put on the mask. She was now 27. She had spent the best years of her life living a lie, every single action in service of an end. She had her victory, but it was a hollow one. Revenge hadn't brought her father back. It hadn't healed the wound of her loss. It had only created more wreckage. She thought of Sophia and baby Arthur, an innocent woman and child caught in the crossfire of a war that began before they were even involved. A single tear traced a path down her cheek, not of triumph, but of sorrow. For her father, for herself. for the years she could never get back. Her revenge was complete, but her life felt like a blank page. The quest was over, and for the first time in a decade, Catalina Sokolov had no idea what to do next. In the end, this was a story about legacies. The one Julian Vance tried to build with money and lies, which crumbled to dust. The one Catalina Sokolov fought to restore with vengeance, only to find herself lost in the victory. And the one Sophia Vance built from the ashes of her grief, a legacy of strength, integrity, and hope for her son Arthur. It is a raw and powerful reminder that the choices we make, especially when we believe no one is watching, echo across generations. True wealth isn't found in a yacht or a stock portfolio. It's found in the honor we show to the people we love. If this story of betrayal, strength, and ultimate justice resonated with you, please take a moment to hit the like button to help us reach more people. Share it with someone who appreciates a story with real-life drama and powerful twists. And most importantly, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next story. Thanks for listening.